You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live.
Well, we've heard your voice there, but you're not hosting today's episode, bizarrely. I've stepped out from behind the scenes. Producer Dan, I'm often referred to on this show, to host today's episode of Garibaldi Red / Facebook Live, as Sarah is still off. So that means you have taken Sarah's place as the Nottingham Forest expert. Matt, how are you this evening?
I'm all right. I'm tired. We've been talking about how it's been a long day for both of us, and I've had my daughter's party with 3 6-year-olds going mad and eating too much sugar. So yeah, it's been tiring, but fruitful for Forest getting Knockaert in.
Yeah, the flip side of that, though, is that you have told me you've got some extra chicken wings left over in your house, so once this is over, you'll be stuffing your face with those, I assume. Yeah,
21 chicken wings. We didn't eat them all, so I think there's about 10 left and 6 cookies, so I might go for that.
And you can tell it's a mad deadline day, isn't it, when it's at 8 o'clock and we've spent the first minute of this talking about food. So let's talk about Knockaert then. There's 3 comments coming already with Knockaert, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So I'll take that as Forest fans are happy with this one then, even though it's only a loan till January, I understand you've told me.
Well, yeah, they should be happy, shouldn't they? It's he's 28, but he's got promoted 3 times from the Championship with Brighton, Leicester and Fulham. So he knows the league inside out. He's at the prime of his career. But he feels like he's been around for a long time. He should be well motivated because he's been well outside the Fulham first team squad this season, so he's got a point to prove. I think the interesting thing about it is it's only till January. We were all led to believe it was going to be till the end of the season, so it's only until the festive period, which I guess you could read a few ways. Fulham are really terrible, aren't they, in the Premier League? So if they're still terrible in January, they might want to bring him back to try and revive their season. If he's playing well at Forest, then they might want to sell him. Forest might try and buy him. There's an option there. I don't know what the fee is. So it's kind of a bit up in the air beyond January. There's a lot of avenues it could go down, but I think instinctively it's good news to get a player of his quality in. Forest was short on wingers, which is a bit nice in all the signings they've made. So he's exactly what they needed, even if they don't get Grosicki, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I think it's a massive boost for Forest. Even though it's so many signings, he is as good a signing as any Championship club has made since the end of last season, I would say.
It's almost like we've planned this a little bit, because everything I was going to ask you, you've kind of just glossed over a little bit of it all there anyway. I was going to ask you about, even though you've signed, I think this is 14 now, did you think you needed a winger still? Because at some point you have to say, all right, well, we've signed a lot of players here, surely we have to stop now.
Yeah, I think it got to the stage in the latter days of Lamucci where I was getting kind of actively annoyed when they signed a player because it was so many, and you kind of thought, like, Cafu, he might be a good player. I've not seen him. I don't want to rule him out, but you kind of think, well, how's he going to get a game? I think Daniel Story was talking about that on the podcast in the week. So I think it's different now with Hughton because he wants to bring his own players in, and Knockaert's proven. And I do think he's what they needed. When you say about a winger, they've got Lolly, Amiobi and Alex Myton as the kind of specialist wingers. And when you look at them and you go through them, I mean, Lolly was brilliant a couple of seasons ago, and he was good last season, but he's been struggling with injury and his form's been poor this season. Amiobi has been really good transfer, consistent, a lot more consistent. I think Forest fans thought he was going to be, but he's not the bloke who's going to get you 15 goals and 10 assists or 10 goals and 15 assists, that kind of player. And then Myton I think he's going to be class, and I think he's going to play in the Premier League sooner rather than later, but he's very raw. So that leaves Knockaert as the guy who can get you 15 goals or 10 goals and a load of assists and can put a good dead ball in, which is an area Forest has been lacking in. So he is exactly what they needed, even though, like we say, it's been so many signings. He's probably the first one I felt really happy with since Arter, I suppose. Yeah, Harry Arter I was happy with, but like I said, it just did get a bit mental in the latter days of Lamucci.
Obviously, they backed Lamucci, giving him all that money to spend, or whether it's money or not, still saying here, go and sign these players that you want. Do you think it's a good sign that they've now brought Hughton in, and this is obviously clearly a Chris Hughton man, a Chris Hughton signing, that they've brought him in and said, right, well, do you still think you need any more business? Yes, here's Anthony Knockaert. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it sends a good message because, there's been the talk of interference from above. So to say it's a Hughton signing is an important step, and it sends a good message that the new man's able to bring his players in. And it is to the credit of the board, the owner, Evangelos Marinakis, that he's put his hand in his pocket to such a degree at the moment with all the trouble that there is, in football, and how badly clubs are struggling. There's no other championship club that's gone about it like this. So it's to his credit, but it has been a bit mad. So we'll have to see how the squad settles down now. Obviously, there's the Grosicki question, which we'll talk about in a minute, I guess. But after this is it till January, and then you have to give Hughton a fair crack and see what he can do with it.
We'll talk about Grosicki then from Albion. I think the deadline's 5 o'clock, isn't it? And they can submit the paperwork until 5 o'clock. You always hear about deals being done late, and they get over the line later than the deadline itself. But it's almost 8 o'clock now. Does that mean that this one won't be done, or could it just pop up out of nowhere in the next 10 minutes or so?
It could. I mean, I've got an alert. Got my phone ready, waiting to hear anything. So, as we understood it, the terms were agreed with the clubs, and they were both happy with it. And then it was down to Grosicki to get it, agree to come and get it over the line, which has been a problem. It's been a bit Ross and Rachel with Grosicki. He's been so close to sign. It's been a bit on and off for ages, going back through previous windows. So they had till 5 o'clock to submit the papers. And I've not heard if that's happened or not, if it all went through in time. I think it could rumble on till tomorrow. Well, it won't go. They're going to play Blackburn tomorrow, so we'll know by then. But I wouldn't be surprised if we went to bed tonight not knowing exactly what's happening. We just have to wait and see. There's people commenting, saying it's happening, it's not happening in the comments I can see, which probably sums it up. So, I'm waiting to hear. And then we'll just know, really. I don't think there's much more you can do.
Is he a winger as well, or am I getting confused with somebody else? Is he a central midfielder?
No, he's a winger. He's 32. He's a current Polish international. So even though he's 32, he's still a good player. He only signed. He would. Yeah, I think he would. If he signs, I think he'd play wide left, and Knockaert would play wide right, cutting in from the wing. That's how I'd imagine it would be. Grosicki only signed for Albion in January, having done so well at Hull, but he can't get in their Premier League team. So that's where he would fit in, which would leave Lolly, Amiobi and Mighton not in the cold, but pushing to get into the team. So, but to be honest, if Grosicki doesn't sign, I would still say, I'm going to write a piece about this later, that it's Forest's best squad since they were relegated from the Premier League now. I mean, it doesn't mean it's an easy job for Chris Hughton by a long stretch, but I think that it's the best group of players they've probably had since the Billy Davies squad was good, and the Paul Hart squad was good in the sense that he developed players. But on paper, this is as good as it's been for a very long time. Challenge for Hughton now is that he's got 30 players, and how he blends that into a side quickly to start winning when the team can't buy a goal, can't buy a point. It's not an enviable job, but I think that Hughton's got all the tools there to work with if he's given time, which is always the commodity that's lacking at Forest and in football.
I want to talk about the pressure of the squad, because obviously a difficult start to the season, to put it lightly. Loads of signings, new manager comes in. How quickly now do Forest need to pick up some points to have a decent season this season still? Because it's only 4 games gone.
Yeah, it's 4 games gone, 4 losses. So how many can you take to get promoted, to get in the playoffs? They could probably lose another 7 games. 6. No, I think they could lose. Yeah, maybe. I think to go up automatically, they can only lose another 3 or 4 or something like that. So, yeah, the pressure's on straight away. I think if you look at the games coming up, there's a lot of them in a condensed period, but they've got Blackburn away, which is going to be tough because they're playing well. then Rotherham at home, which you should be confident of winning, and then Derby, and then Luton. And they're not the worst fixtures to have first up. If they can get, 7 points from those 4 games, 9 points from those 4 games, the table looks a little bit different. And then you start edging up into December and January, and suddenly if Forest are mid-table, then you could be that team that breaks from the pack and gets into the playoffs. So there's a lot of pressure there. I think there's still time to turn it around, but it's going to take a hell of a job from Hughton. I mean, if he does manage to get this team up this season, it will be an incredible achievement. I don't think it will happen personally. I don't want to have people on here saying, don't talk nonsense, because I don't think it will happen. But if he is here next season with this squad and not another 15 different players, or maybe he actually would want to bring his own players in. Yeah, well, yeah, he might want to bring his own players in anyway. We might see he might not fancy any of this lot. Yeah, but I'm rambling to say I think he's the right man for the job, but he needs to be given time.
Let me play devil's advocate then, as a non-Forest fan. That is it as easy as saying, "Oh yeah, 7 points from the next few games," because you've had such a poor start and a poor end to last season. Is it as easy as turning it around that quickly, or is it necessary to say, look, we might need to be a bit patient, and this season could still be a struggle yet? Not a struggle as in being around the bottom, but a nothing season, basically.
Well, I mean, I would take a mid-table season from here, but I know fans won't. And even if they come in the comments now and say, I'd take a mid-table season or a top 10 season, I think that Forest, with the money they've spent, will expect to be pushing. So it does put the pressure on straight away. I think he needs time. I mean, I did his press conference yesterday because Sarah's off, and he's talking about how he's going to give every player a good look, a chance to prove himself. That's 30 players, so I don't see how he can. I mean, I don't think that's possible. But I think he can have a decent look in these upcoming games at 20 of them, maybe. I don't know. I mean, 7 games in 21 days. You're not going to play 11 players in that, are you? So I think he's going to have a decent look at guys like in midfield, Arter, Sow, Colback, and Yates. I would think. I wouldn't be surprised if all 4 played. And then up front, Graben and Taylor are going to perhaps have to rotate. The wingers might rotate. Now there's actually wingers to do it. I think the only position, I don't know what you're like, Dan, but I like a steady back 4. I would run a back 4 into the ground just for continuity, really. I wouldn't change the centre halves unless I had to, if they're playing well. As long as they're playing well, and then perhaps rotate in front of them. But if he can strike on a central defensive partnership while Joe Worrell's injured that works, then I would stick with that and then have a bit of a rotation policy in front of them.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm trying to half scan the mood of the comments, and part of me feels like it's a little bit like the season that Villa did go up when Steve Bruce started the season, and we had a poor start then, and we all praised Dean Smith for getting us there eventually, and you look back with hindsight and go, yeah, but his squad was very good. They should have been better than they were before it got to that stage. I almost wonder whether you could make similar comparisons with Forest this season if it does go well, and so it almost be like, oh my God, I can't believe how well Chris Hughton did, when in reality your squad should be doing that anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think I'm right in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Bruce was first Villa manager and Tony G came in, they signed all those players. And there's parallels there, I guess, in Forest signing all those players, and then the new man comes in and does an incredible job. And Hughton does feel like the right man for the circumstances because he's got the track record. And he is quite similar to Lamucci tactically, which fans might not like, but I actually think it's quite a benefit that he's not conservative, but he's pragmatic. I think it's fair to say you'll probably see him play 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, the sort of Lamucci, but not all out attack, or 4-4-1-1. So he's going to be fairly defensive-ish minded, but I think the difference is that he's going to be able to adapt, and if it's not working within a game, we'll see him make changes, which is where Lamucci fell down. I think you look back the Huddersfield game where they were dire and he took off a striker and put a striker on instead of putting two strikers on. I hope that Hughton isn't going to be like that, and that he is going to be more flexible. And I'm not saying he's going to do a Dean Smith and take Forest up, but I think they'll be much better off after a few weeks of Chris Hughton than they would have been if they kept hammering away at Lamucci, because I think his race looked run certainly by the time he left.
Do you think that was almost? So we spoke about it, haven't we, off air when we I sit here and give my 2 pence off air after you've recorded the podcast. And I remember saying to you when we looked at fixtures ahead at one point, I was thinking, he won't be there for that Derby game. It almost felt inevitable, didn't it, when you get that far that you're having a bad run, that he was going to lose his job at some point. So do you think it was inevitable that was going to happen, and now you've got the right man? I know you've probably talked about this on previous podcasts anyway, but now we're talking about it. It's like first game is here tomorrow. Is this almost the new start that Forest are looking for again?
I think it is. I mean, there's been a lot of new starts with Forest, hasn't there? The clock goes back to zero quite a lot of times with the new manager. And I don't think there's been many times I've advocated for the manager to go. And I think at the end of last season with Hughton, I was quite, with Lamucci, sorry. Once they'd stuck with him, I thought it was the right decision to back him. But it was pretty clear that it wasn't going to work by... maybe even by that Barnsley game, the first League Cup game with hindsight. They were so dire in that game. They looked like a team carrying the baggage of that Stoke game, which was understandable because it was such a disaster. So now the new man comes in and it is a restart that they needed, and it does give that bit of zip about training. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were... I don't think they'll concede late goals anymore. It became symptomatic of that Lamucci team. And to me, I don't know if you agree, it's either tired minds or tired bodies if you're consistently conceding that many late goals. And I don't think Hughton's going to let that happen. I think they'll be sharper mentally and physically under him.
I've got 2 more questions for you and for the comments as well before I let you go. More broad questions. First of all, it's a difficult one considering the amount of signings and the fact that you've had a poor start, but what do you think Forest, I almost said Villa then, what do you think Forest's strongest 11 is now?
I would say Samba in goal, Christie, McKenna, Worrell if he's fit, or then you either Dawson or Embassou as a back central defenders. Left back's interesting because I'm not seeing much of Ayanu, but he did well, and it feels like Ribeiro was on the out. So whether he gets back in, I'm not sure. So I'll say Ayanu at the moment with the caveat of having to see more of him, and then Knockaert on the right or left, Joe Lolly on the other flank, assuming he can get back to his form. Central midfield, Arter for sure, definitely Arter. And then I'd still go Colback, although I think he's been pretty average since he came back to the club. But I think that's a bit understandable because he hadn't played for a year. It seemed I was a bit surprised he played in every game under Lamucci. Because of his lack of football, but I guess the theory was that if he plays every game, he'll get up to speed. Yeah. So if he can get back to being the player that he was in his loan spells at the Forest, then I'd say Colback, and then one off Graben, I would say. So yeah, I still say Graben up front, which is harsh on Taylor because Graben hasn't done very much at all this season. He's missed chances. It'd be lying to say he's played well, but I think. He'll get goals given time. I mean, he pointed out in a piece, I think it's come out already. I wrote, it's been a blur the last few days, but saying how it took him 7 games to score his first goal for Forest when he signed, and then he had a good season. So I think once he gets one, he's one of those players that's going to get on a roll. So I'll say Graben up front and Freeman off him. So that would be 4-4-1-1 or 4-2-3-1, depending how you line them up. So, yeah, that would be my team, but I'm sure people would disagree. I mean, you could throw in other options there, to be fair, couldn't you? You could play Graben off Taylor or something like that, or...
Grosicki instead of Lolly?
Yeah, if Grosicki signs, then you'd probably say Grosicki over Lolly and Knockaert as the wingers. You could make a case for 3 at the back, well, that's not a Hughton, or almost exclusively plays 4 at the back. So I don't think that he'll play 3, but you could make a case for Dawson as the experienced one in the middle, flanked by a young Embasseau and McKenna. So there's lots of options there, which there should be with 30 players.
Speaking of the transfer window, then, just to end, the deadline's done now. You might see Grosicki still come through the door if that was done before the deadline, but lots of signings, 14, maybe 15. How do you rate Forest's transfer window out of 10 now? It's difficult, isn't it, because they've not had a good start. You've not even seen a lot of the players yet, but on paper, I know it's weird to judge transfer windows at this point of the season rather than at the end of a season, but what would you say if you had to give it a rating out of 10?
I'm just looking in the comments. I think I said about Luke Freeman. Sorry, of him being the number 10 behind a striker. So yeah, sorry to Greg Orham and Tom Jackson. Sorry. Yeah. How would I rate it out of 10? God, that's difficult, isn't it? Because they've signed so many players. I mean, you could rate it anything from like a 3 to a 10. It depends how you view it. I would.
It's a difficult and it's a stupid question, really, but it's part of the job.
I'd say 7.5. I mean, I could talk myself in knots here. If you're positive about it, they've signed some really high quality players. If you go through it, McKenna, Arter, Colback, Knockaert, Freeman, and Taylor, and Christie would walk into almost every championship team, wouldn't they? So that's brilliant. The question becomes, is it too many when you sign Diallo, Bashiru, Cafu, and you wonder now, how are they going to get a game? So you have to knock them down for that, I would say, for the volume of players. I mean, the counter argument is that they've shipped out Adoma, Silva, Pantilimon, Carvalho, and probably a few more. There's so many that I'm forgetting.
Could you get some more, though, do you think? You need to, don't you, because the squad's so big?
Yeah, I mean, there's still Heffler, Clough, and Bong, who look a million miles off it. Ribeiro was frozen out. Does he get back in? Figueiredo was ready to return to Portugal. So there's question marks over them going into January. So I think you have to, look at who might leave, knock a few points off for just having such a ridiculously big squad. And I'd say 7.5 out of 10.
I'm going to say 8 just for banter. Don't even know enough about Forest to say, but just to one up you, I'm going to say 8. There's a few people saying 8 in the comments, to be fair.
Yeah, perhaps I've been. There's people are more positive than I thought. There's a few 8s and 9. Even 9s, yeah. But I'll stick with 7.5.
I mean, someone made a great point. I've already scrolled past it. No point having great players unless they start to play well together, which is why judging a transfer window at this point is silly, isn't it? Because you're looking at that going, that's a lot of players. If they don't gel, then it's a bad window. If they're world beaters and you win the league, absolutely amazing window, isn't it? It's one to judge later down the line, not 10 minutes after the window's just closed. Yeah,
like Hughton said yesterday, if I asked him, is it a blessing or a curse to have so many games in a short space of time? And he said, it depends on the results. And he's right, really. I mean, if they win these games, then fantastic. And if we win a game and it doesn't matter if we play well, then people are going to say I picked the right team. And if we lose a game, people are going to say I picked the wrong team. So you're almost always damned if you do and damned if you don't as a manager. And perhaps Forest are the same way with the transfer window. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. It's certainly been chaotic. It's the craziest one I can remember, even for a club which has signed 70 players since 2017.
Oh, that's mad, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, we'll let everybody go. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It's been almost 150 people for the majority of this for 25 minutes on a Friday night. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I hope I've been a reasonable host, considering I've admittedly don't know enough about Nottingham Forest to host a podcast yet. Here we are. Matt, do you want to do a usual outro, seeing as this is your gig?
Yes, I'll bumble around like I do as ever. Thanks to everyone who watched along and for all the comments. I've been reading them as we go along, which is a bit weird when you're the person talking most.
It's hard, isn't it?
It is. It's difficult, actually. So, we'll be back after the Blackburn game just to talk about that. And then next week, I don't think I'm here because I'll be in the recovery position in the corner of my house somewhere.
Rocking back and forth.
Yeah, but I'm supposed to be off. So the main podcast will be the preview of the Derby game, I would think, which should be exciting and a good one, obviously. And yeah, I think that's about it. Give us a rating on iTunes and subscribe on YouTube, because we've picked up a load of subscribers in the last week, which is good. And that's it. We'll see you all soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Shall I press end? Are you happy with that?
End broadcast.
Thank you for listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for listening.